Real quick, if you have a story to tell, please reach out via email at contact@campfirecultpod.com or leave me a voicemail message at 720-297-8608. Also, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Campfire Cult Pod for free. It'll really help us reach listeners just like you. If you want to become a Patreon cult member to get extended episodes and other full Patreon-only episodes, you can sign up at patreon.com/campfirecultpod for only $5 a month. And finally, if you don't mind, please share, rate, and review wherever possible. Welcome, dear listener, to the Campfire Cult Podcast. From a camper van deep in the haunted woods, I bring you first-hand accounts of chilling encounters with the paranormal. Step into the night and take a peek into the realm where reality and the supernatural collide. My name is Jazz, and I'll be your host. Welcome back, campers. Tonight, the stories come from every shadowed corner of the unknown, each one whispered by someone who swears what they saw was real. From the deep woods to quiet bedrooms, from skies that hum to roads that vanish, we're traveling the thin line between what's real and what's waiting just beyond the firelight. So stoke that fire, pour another cup of coffee, and keep your eyes on the tree line, because out there something's watching. And before the night's over, it might just step out into the light. Let's begin. First up, a child in the Appalachian Hills locks eyes with a shadowy figure, burning red eyes, frozen time, and a terror that never left.
I've been thinking about this encounter for over 20 years now, and I still can't make sense of it. So, I figured I'd share it. This happened sometime around 1997 or 1998. Somewhere in the Appalachian region of the Carolinas. I was a kid, first or second grade maybe. Sitting on the couch in our old double-wide trailer with my backpack on, waiting for my mom to finish drying her hair. She had that big, fluffy 90s hair, you know the kind. From where I was sitting in the living room, I could see straight through the opening in the wall into the dining room. It wasn't far, just a few steps away. And that's when I saw him. Right there, standing or maybe floating behind the dining room table, was a man made entirely of shadow. Solid black. I looked at him, and he turned his head to look right back at me. That's when I saw his eyes. Two burning red holes staring straight into me. The second our eyes met, it felt like time stopped. I was completely frozen, trapped in this overwhelming sense of terror unlike anything I've ever felt since. And I've been through some pretty terrifying things in my life, but nothing compares to that moment. After what felt like an eternity, he turned and glided, almost floated, out through the far end of the trailer. As soon as he was gone, I jumped up screaming and ran straight to my mom. I told her what I saw, and she tried to calm me down, saying, "It's okay, that was just your grandpa." But I knew. It was not my grandpa. Now we're from Appalachia, and around here, ghosts and spirits are pretty much accepted as real. But people also know when someone's just telling a tall tale, so you learn to take every story with a bit of discernment. Still, I've never been able to make sense of what I saw. Years later, in my early 20s, I stumbled across a story online about Shadowmen. Some even mentioned hats. And that hit me hard. It was the first time I'd ever heard anyone describe something close to what I'd seen. But I've still never come across anyone who's seen this exact figure. All I know is, the fear I felt that day was all-consuming. And if I've learned anything from that moment, it's that whatever that thing was, it wasn't good. Has anyone else seen something like this?
Next, a series of eerie Bigfoot encounters in North Carolina. Knocks in the night, giant handprints, and a man who claims they know him. In the fall of 2018, a Bigfoot enthusiast visiting a friend in Little Switzerland, North Carolina, had one of the most unsettling nights of his life. After dinner, he stepped outside for some fresh mountain air, only to be met with the sound of wood knocking somewhere in the dark. Then another knock, and another. Calls seemed to echo from different directions through the forest. Curious, he picked up a branch and struck a nearby tree. Almost instantly, something out there answered. The next night, things escalated. A long, drawn-out howl rolled across the ridge, followed by heavy thuds on the roof and pounding on the walls. His elderly hostess was woken by the noise too, something she said had never happened in her 25 years of living there. Later, he realized a tree growing through the deck could have provided an easy path up to the roof. There were no tracks, no evidence, just the memory of those sounds echoing in the dark and two shaken people wondering what else shared that mountain with them. Not far away, in Mountain City, Joy found something even more chilling. A massive 10-inch handprint smeared across the back of her freshly washed Jeep. At first, she thought it might have been a bear, but there were no claw marks, just a broad palm, a thumb, and fingers far too large for a human. Stranger still, the print wasn't left in mud, but in a fine dusting of creek sand. Her collie had barked wildly the night before, but she hadn't thought much of it until she saw that handprint. Her long driveway winds deep through the woods, and there were no signs of trespassers. Her family hesitated, then said the word she didn't want to hear: Sasquatch. The farm's been quiet since, but she admits she keeps her windows closed now, just in case. Then there's Tom, a man who claims nearly 2 decades of encounters near Old Fort along Curtis Creek. Unlike most witnesses, Tom insists the creatures know him. He says they've even left him gifts: mushrooms, meat, and foraged plants placed in the same spots he travels. He believes Bigfoot is far more intelligent than people think, working in groups, using bears as hunting partners, and staying deliberately out of sight. In one case, he believes he stumbled onto a Bigfoot hunting party. Only later, when he enlarged his photos, did he realize a humanoid face was staring right back at him from the brush. The most disturbing encounter came when Tom claimed to find what looked like a young Bigfoot left near his property. He tried to return it to the forest, but days later the small creature was found dead. He sent its skull for DNA testing, but according to him, the lab has gone silent ever since. Tom's learned to keep his distance now. He observes, he documents, and he writes about his experiences in nature's secret agents. To him, Bigfoot isn't a monster. It's a guardian of the forest, intelligent, watchful, and wary of what humanity has become. Coming up, 3 friends drinking by a cemetery pond witness a falling orb, then 5 faceless men in black emerge from the darkness.
It was June of 1995. My girlfriend at the time, my cousin, and I decided to grab a few beers and hang out at Glen Rest Cemetery. Her family actually owned the place in Reynoldsburg, Ohio. We were sitting on the old stone bridge over the pond in the middle of the cemetery. The air was still and warm, the sky clear. My girlfriend was stretched out on the stone ledge beside us, wide enough for her to lie there comfortably without worry of falling. We were talking and watching the stars when something strange caught our attention. An orb streaked silently across the sky, glowing red and orange with flickers of yellow, blue, and green. It drifted down and disappeared just beyond the tree line, maybe 500 yards away. My cousin and I jumped to our feet, eager to see where it had landed. I told him to hang on while I turned to my girlfriend to ask if she wanted to come with us. I reached out my hand to help her up, and that's when she froze. Her eyes went wide and she started yelling, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" Then her legs gave out beneath her. She hit the ground hard, pointing toward the opposite side of the pond. I turned to look, and that's when I saw them. A man stepped out from the darkness, human-shaped, but I couldn't make out his face. He wore black dress pants and a white long-sleeve shirt. Then 2 more figures emerged behind him, dressed the same, forming a V shape like geese in flight. 2 others followed close behind. My girlfriend was crying now, shouting for us to run. I yelled for my cousin. He started coming toward us, but for a moment, it looked like he was walking toward where the orb had fallen instead. I shouted his name again, and when he turned to see the figures, it was like time just stopped. Then my girlfriend took off running toward her house near the front of the cemetery. I followed, glancing back to see my cousin standing still. I remember thinking, what is he doing? What's going to happen to him? About a third of the way to the house, my girlfriend's foot sank into the mud and she fell. I grabbed her, lifted her up, and kept running. I don't even remember the feeling of running, just the sound of my heartbeat and the rush of fear. And then suddenly, we were in her driveway. My cousin was already there. We all piled into his truck and tore out of the cemetery. The next thing I remember, it was daylight. I've seen an orb like that once more in my life. Back when I was a kid, sitting on the porch with my dad's friend and neighbor. But I've never seen those men again.
Real quick, when I'm away from the campfire and not producing this show, I'm a brand designer and coffee roaster. This year I launched my own coffee brand called Outlands Coffee. If you love damn good coffee and want to support a fiercely independent small business while also supporting this podcast, head over to outlandscoffee.com and give us a shot. I roast to order, single origin perfection alongside a couple of bold, adventurous blends, crafted for those who take their coffee as seriously as their campfire stories. Here in Washington, we don't just believe in Bigfoot, we believe in great coffee too. Try it for yourself. Use code CAMPFIRE for $5 off your first order. Now, back to the show. Up next, a young boy near Lexington wakes with a nightmare of gray beings taking him to the moon.
My son came to me early one morning in late August of 2025, crying, shaking, and absolutely terrified. We live near Lexington, Kentucky, and he almost never talks about his dreams. But that morning was different. Something about the way he clung to me made me listen. He said that in his dream, he woke up to find little gray men standing in his room. They took him by the hand, led him out the door, and onto their ship. He described them as short, with long, stick-like fingers and huge black eyes. When I asked what their noses looked like, he pushed his own nose up into his face and said, "Like this." Tiny, just nostrils. The ship, he said, was silver and round, with yellow, green, and white lights all around it, like a ball with a ring. He told me they took him to the moon. The gray men whispered to each other, and he remembered hearing them say, "Stay. Stay with us." He kept repeating that part, almost like it had been burned into his memory. Then he said he told them, "No, take me home to Mommy." Now I know kids can dream up wild things. They see something on TV or hear a story and their imagination runs off. But I'm almost certain he hasn't seen anything that could have planted this kind of story in his mind. He just turned 5, and he's one of the most honest kids I know. The way he told me this with tears in his eyes and every detail so clear, I believe that he believed what he saw. Maybe it was only a dream, but I've never heard him describe one like that before. And if anything else happens, anything at all, I'll be reporting it again.
That's chilling. Kids don't usually invent details like that. The ship, the whispers, the way he remembered their words. Whether dream or something else, it leaves you wondering, what if he really was taken somewhere that night and only remembers it as a dream? Next, a farmer discovers something dark lurking in the woods after finding a strange animal hide cloak, and now it's mimicking his family's voices at night.
I bought the land a couple of years back from an older man who'd lived there since the 1950s. It wasn't cheap, but it was a good deal. Plenty of acreage, a solid barn, and a small farmhouse that just needed some love. It felt like a dream come true. Right after I signed the papers, the old man told me, "Make sure there are always cows on the property." I laughed it off at the time. Figured it was just one of those old farmer superstitions. Looking back, I wish I'd listened. He passed away not long after he moved into assisted living. The first year went fine. The cows were fat and healthy by winter. We even painted the barn red and white, classic farm colors. Life was good. Then one autumn afternoon, we went for a walk and found something strange. A cloak, stitched together from animal hides. Coyote, deer, maybe raccoon. It looked old and handmade, like a hunter's relic. I figured it must have been the old man's, so I brought it home and tossed it in the barn. The fur was still in good shape. I thought maybe I could use it for something. Big mistake. A few weeks later, a couple of calves went missing. I chalked it up to coyotes. But then the rabbits my kids were raising started disappearing too. First 2, then 4, then all of them. Gone without a trace. No tracks, no fur, no blood. My kids were crushed. I set traps, but nothing ever touched them. I started to wonder if something else was out there. Something smart. One night, I grabbed my .22 rifle and a flashlight and went out looking. I'm not a big gun guy, but I knew I needed it. The woods were quiet, too quiet. Just an owl or two off in the distance. When I got back, I noticed fresh claw marks on one of the trees, way higher than I could reach. That's when I stopped thinking coyotes and started thinking something else. Maybe a bear, I thought, until I heard it. A howl, deep and strange. Nothing like a coyote or a wolf. It sounded almost human. I set up trail cameras around the property, but every time I did, they got smashed. The SD card still worked, but there was never anything on them, just static. By late November, we lost 2 cows, both pregnant. Their bodies were mutilated, but only the unborn calves were missing. I tried to tell myself it was a cougar, but after reading up on how cougars hunt, it didn't fit. It was too clean, too deliberate. When the snow came, I started losing sleep. I stayed up late reading about livestock mutilations, and somehow ended up in the depths of the internet. Alien theories, abduction stories, you name it. I didn't buy any of it, but I didn't have a better explanation. Then one night, my oldest son, he's 13, came running down the stairs, terrified. He said something was outside looking in at him through his window. I got up and went to check. At first, I didn't see anything. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw it. A deer. At least that's what I thought. But it wasn't right. Its body was too long, its limbs too thin, and its skin black, like it had been burned. No antlers. Hollow eyes. My son and I just stood there, staring at it through the glass. It didn't move. Then it turned and walked off into the dark. A few seconds later, we heard it. The same blood-curdling scream we'd heard before. Only this time, it sounded like my son. Since that night, we haven't seen it again, but we know it's still around. The signs are everywhere. Missing animals, claw marks on the posts, strange howls that mimic the voices of people we know. And every time I hear it calling out from the tree line, I wonder what would have happened if I just left that cloak where I found it.
Man, that last bit is chilling. If you heard familiar voices calling from the woods, would you answer? Coming up, after moving into a quiet condo, a mother sees a small, twisted figure with black eyes crouched at the foot of her bed. Then it vanishes.
In April of 2016, I moved into a quiet little condo in the suburbs of Niagara Falls. From the moment I first walked in, it just felt like home. Calm, welcoming, and peaceful. For someone as sensitive as I am, that kind of energy really matters. But over the last few weeks, that peace had started to shift. I'd been getting that familiar, uneasy feeling, like someone was watching me when no one was there. One night, midweek, I was up late finishing the laundry, listening to the radio while I ironed clothes and put them away in my room and my son's. When I walked back into my bedroom with the lights off, I froze. At the foot of my bed, crouched on all fours, was something small, like a boy, but not. It had dark black eyes that caught the light from outside, and a face that looked almost human. Almost. Its body was twisted in an unnatural way, like it wasn't meant to move that way. I stepped into the room without realizing what I was looking at, and then it turned its head toward me. The look on its face, that sneer, hit me with pure dread. I dropped the laundry basket and just said, "Nope!" before backing out of the room. When I blinked, it was gone. I'm a skeptic by nature, so I went back in. I turned the lights on, checked every corner, looked for my cat, who was still curled up, asleep on the couch. My son was sound asleep in his bed. There was nothing there. Nothing that could have cast a shadow or tricked my eyes. Needless to say, I didn't sleep in my room that night. I haven't seen that figure again, but if I do, I'll let you know.
Up next, a child vanishes in the woods at Fall Creek Falls, only to return an hour later with memories of gray humanoid beings watching from the trees.
It was October 12th, 1973 at Fall Creek Falls, Tennessee. I was 6 years old, and my family had just finished lunch before heading out on a horseback ride. It was me, my mom, my dad, and my older brother. He was 12 at the time. I rode in the saddle with my mom, while my dad and brother each had their own horse. Right at the start of the ride, my brother's horse got spooked and bolted down the trail. I remember the panic, my dad yelling, the thundering hooves, the chaos of it all. Thankfully, my mom, who'd been riding for years, managed to grab my brother and pull him to safety. After that scare, neither of us kids wanted anything to do with the horses. We asked if we could just walk ahead on the trail. A few minutes later, my brother and I found ourselves alone in the woods. Everything went quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. There was a strange stillness in the air. Then suddenly, my brother took off running back toward our parents, leaving me standing there completely alone. That's when I remember seeing them. A few small grayish humanoid figures moving toward me. The next thing I remember, I was standing at the edge of the woods with them, looking out toward the parking lot by the horse barn. They told me I had to go back to my family, but I didn't want to. I wanted to stay. Still, I started walking toward the car, and when I looked back, just once, they were gone. I didn't realize it then, but my parents had been searching for me for nearly an hour. My mom later told me they were just about to contact the park ranger when I appeared, walking out of the trees. That was my first encounter with what I now know were the Greys, right in the middle of the great UFO wave of October 1973.
Next, two girls in rural North Carolina spot a pale, human-like face watching them from the trees. After hearing a 911 call from 2021, one of them decided to tell their story.
I was born and raised in North Carolina, and I'm so glad I came across the 911 call of a man who saw what sounds like the creature I saw when I was younger. When I was 12, around 2015, my best friend and I were hanging out in her hammock during summer break. She lived out in the Piedmont area, surrounded by acres of woods. We were facing opposite directions, just talking and laughing under the stars. It was around midnight when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Her face went pale, completely frozen in fear. She didn't move for what felt like 10 seconds. My stomach dropped, and it took everything in me to turn around and see what she was looking at. Between the split trunk of a nearby tree, was a pale, white, human-like face, deep sunken eyes staring straight at us. It wasn't moving, wasn't making a sound, just watching, listening. I froze. We locked eyes for what felt like forever before she suddenly bolted off the hammock and ran inside. I tried to follow but got tangled, went face first into the dirt, and scrambled up to chase after her. We slammed the door, locked it, and just stood there, staring at each other in shock. Neither of us said anything at first. It was like we both knew words wouldn't help. That night, we didn't sleep. We stayed up talking, replaying every detail, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. For years after, I had nightmares about that thing, about those eyes. Even now, I feel a lump in my throat just remembering it. The memory had been buried for a while, but after hearing that 911 call, I had to share my story. I never knew anyone else who'd seen something like it. But it turns out, other North Carolinians have.
Now, for those of you that haven't heard the 911 call, here it is, as well as his description of the creature from an interview, courtesy of YouTube channel Carolina Case Files. First, I'll play the 911 call.
Henry County 911, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm driving on 210. I just crossed the Black River, and I thought I saw a guy standing on the side of the road bleeding.
Okay, where are you at, sir?
I'm on 210. I just crossed the Black River. I'm heading towards 53 East. I just passed Patriots Watch.
Okay, so you're over near Morse Creek?
Yes.
Okay. And did You saw a man standing on the side of the road?
What the?
What was that, sir?
That's not human! That's not human!
Sir, are you okay, sir?
There's something in the bed of my truck!
Okay, what's in the road?
No, it's not in the road, it's in my truck. In the bed.
There's something in the bed of your truck?
Yes, ma'am, I just turned on my bed lights for my truck and there's something in my bed.
Okay, sir, when you say something, what do you mean?
I just knocked it off of the bed of my truck and went over my roof.
Okay, what was it?
And now, the description from his interview.
Coming up from Florida to visit my family. At the time, I was going to a trade school down there, and when I was driving up here to where the incident occurred by the battlefield, it was already easily like well into the morning. I wasn't looking at my phone. I just know it was pitch black outside, and it was pitch black. I couldn't see the moon, stars, nothing, just barely the road through my headlights. And I had my window down because the AC wasn't working the best. And as I was coming around, there's a massive right curve right there before you cross the Black River, and then after that, you have the battlefield. So on that massive black curve, as I'm coming around, I had just started the curve, and I was about a third of the way through it, and I look over into the ditch on my right, because I caught a quick glimpse of something, and as I take a further look, it looks like there's I'd say probably a 30-something-year-old man standing in that ditch wearing what looks like an old Civil War uniform, just covered head to toe in blood. And the uniform was torn as well. That threw me off because I didn't expect to see it at like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, I'm calling 911 after I see him to report that, because for all I know, it could have just been a normal guy that was injured and needed needed emergency help. It looked like what had happened is he hit his head on something.
Okay.
And the blood was just pooling down over his face and torso.
Okay.
And well, as I was calling, everything seemed perfectly normal. Just quick phone call to 911, let them know, hey, there's a guy out here, and try to find somewhere safe to park so that way I can take them to him. Well, as you know from the 911 call, right as soon as I reported that, I already had my window up at that point. All of a sudden, I heard a massive bang on my truck, and my truck bounced down from the rear, like I was pulling a heavy trailer and I hit a pothole.
Wow. And
so I'm sitting there going, what the hell was that? Which I'm pretty sure you heard me yell, what the hell? I turned on my my bed light, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and all I saw was this white, like snow white face right up against my rear windshield, like it was looking into my truck trying to see what it could see. It had shallow sunken eyes. It had no nose. Just think if you took skin and put it on a human skull and stretched it thin. Couldn't see any ears, just that. And immediately I just started screaming. I didn't realize until afterwards that I had said that's not human on the call, because it was just the first thing I started screaming, because I was terrified. I didn't have my firearm with me, nothing. All I had was
I wonder what it was these people are seeing in rural North Carolina. Let me know what you think in the comments. Next up, in 1978, Russia, a man vanished through a concrete wall and reappeared minutes later, claiming he'd met black, rectangular-headed beings. It was January 14th, 1978, in Rostov-on-Don, Russia. 3 friends, Mikhail Babkin, Nikolai Leontiev, and Vitaly Kravchenko, all 18 years old, were spending the night at a local sports complex called Oktyabrskyok. They'd been celebrating the old new year, champagne, a few vodka shots, time in the sauna and pool, when, around 6 in the morning, the night watchman told them it was time to head home. He walked them to the back exit, a long windowless corridor in the basement that ran along the pool wall. The watchman led the way, Leontiev followed, then Babkin, with Kravchenko behind him. The concrete passage was narrow and silent. That's when it happened. Without warning, Babkin stumbled, as if he'd tripped on something that wasn't there. The floor was smooth concrete, no holes or cracks, but his left leg seemed to catch on something unseen. He cried out, and when Leontiev turned to look, he froze in disbelief. Babkin's shoulder had sunk straight into the wall. Before anyone could react, his entire body slipped through the concrete and vanished. The others rushed to the spot, running their hands along the wall, searching for seams or hidden doors. Nothing, just cold concrete. Meanwhile, Babkin said he found himself standing in a small dark room. To his left, something like a medical chair. Ahead, a slightly open door. And on the right wall, a narrow window showing treetops swaying in the wind. But these trees were covered in lush green leaves. It was bright daylight outside, and warm. Yet, moments earlier, he'd been underground, in the dead of a Russian winter. Drawn forward, almost in a trance, he opened the door and stepped into another dim room. A circular light glowed faintly from the ceiling. Another medical chair stood nearby. He felt dizzy, moving like a sleepwalker until he opened a second door and walked into complete darkness. In that blackness, faint patches of light pulsed and shimmered, and out of those lights, figures began to appear. 5 of them. Tall, black humanoid shapes with rectangular heads standing perfectly still. One was hunched over some kind of device. Small, metallic, glowing faintly like a corncob with a pointed end. It was aimed directly at him. Then, inside his head, a voice spoke. "This one?" Another voice answered. "No, not him," the first one said calmly. "Memory erasure is necessary." That's when Babkin panicked. The fog lifted and pure terror took over. He turned and bolted, crashing through the nearest door, bursting back into the corridor of the sports complex, screaming in confusion. Behind him, he heard a door slam. When he spun around, the wall was solid again. No door, no sound, just concrete. His friends said they'd been searching for him for nearly an hour, frantically running through the building, convinced he'd vanished. But Babkin swore he'd only been gone for 5 minutes, in that strange, impossible place. This is such a wild story, very similar to the dimensional bleed story from episode 8 of the 21 CD podcast. Let me know what you think happened in the comments. Coming up, a childhood encounter near San Antonio leaves a young woman haunted by the memory of a winged creature she believes may have been the Mothman.
I heard this story from my cousin, Val, while visiting her a while back. She told me she's only ever shared it with a few close friends, mostly because she's never really understood what she saw. But after coming across stories of the Mothman, she started to wonder if maybe that's what she'd encountered all those years ago. She doesn't remember the exact year, only that it was sometime in the mid-1990s, when she was about 7 or 8 years old. She's 34 now. One afternoon, Val was at her grandmother's house near San Antonio, Texas. The place was full of family and friends for her aunt's baby shower. While the adults were inside chatting, the kids were outside running around the yard. One of the local kids kept talking about a monster that supposedly lived next door. He wouldn't say much else, but Val's curiosity got the better of her. She decided to sneak off and take a look. Behind a shed down in the lower part of the yard, she found a small hole in the fence, just big enough to peek through. The other kids didn't even notice she was gone. A few minutes later, she suddenly felt a shadow pass over her. Then came a rush of air, a heavy swoosh, as something massive landed on the other side of the fence. Val froze. She could just make out a shape moving away from the wall, out of sight. She described what she saw as a tall creature standing on 2 legs, covered in short, light brown fur. It had long, sharp nails, almost like talons. While she never saw its face, she remembered its huge, butterfly-like wings, a muscular, human-shaped body, and thick, powerful legs. She said it even made a soft, swishing sound every time it breathed. For a moment, she couldn't move. It was like her body refused to respond, But when the feeling finally returned, she bolted inside and stared out the window, trembling. To this day, Val doesn't know what she saw that afternoon, but she's certain it was real, and she still believes it might have been the Mothman. And honestly, after hearing her tell it, I believe her.
That's terrifying, and that description fits the classic Mothman encounter almost perfectly. Tall, humanoid, fur-covered, with massive wings and that strange heavy breathing. It's wild how consistent those details are with other sightings across the country. Sounds like Val saw the real thing. Next, we have another encounter with a winged creature when a nurse driving home through rural Minnesota comes face to face with what she called the Owl Man.
It was September 30th, 2010 in Winnebago, Minnesota, a quiet little town of about 1,200 people where the air smelled of turning leaves and harvest dust. I'd just finished my evening shift at the Parker Oaks nursing home and was driving home through the dim country roads when something massive flickered at the edge of my vision, perched among the dark branches of an old tree. I turned my head to look, and when I snapped my eyes back to the road, there it was. Standing dead center in the glow of my headlights was something I still struggled to describe: the Owlman. It stood about 5 feet tall, shaped almost like a man, but crowned with the face of a giant owl. Its arms looked human, with visible biceps and forearms, but they ended not in hands, but in wings. Feathers covered its body, white underneath and brown on top, just like a real owl. But the structure beneath was disturbingly human. Its feet were taloned like a bird's, yet it moved with a strange, deliberate awareness. And its eyes. Its eyes were the part I'll never forget. They were large and brown, like an owl's. But they reflected light like the eyes of something intelligent. Not glowing, not shining, but catching my headlights with a mirror-like brilliance. It felt like looking into a mind. I slammed the brakes, stopped barely 4 feet away, and the thing let out a screech that chilled me to my bones. It was both animal and human at once, wild but intelligent. It spread those enormous wings, feathers catching the air, and for a moment it didn't feel frightening, just unreal, like I had slipped into a place where the laws of nature no longer applied. Then it looked straight at me. Time seemed to stop. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. In that silence, I didn't hear words, but I felt them, deep inside my chest.
I see you.
And just like that, the trance broke. I blinked, and it was gone. All that remained was a flicker of movement above the trees. Something small, impossibly fast, vanishing into the night sky. I drove home on Highway 169, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, when another impossibility appeared. A perfect sphere of green fire, about the size of a tennis ball, drifted outside my passenger window, keeping pace with my car. It glowed like living butane, bright and fluid, its green flames rippling and twisting as it moved. It stayed beside me for what felt like miles before veering away, descending toward a distant cow pasture and fading into the darkness. When I finally got home, my babysitter was furious. I was 2 hours late. The drive should have taken 15 minutes. Somehow I had lost hours I couldn't account for. The next day, I went back to that cow farm to look for scorch marks, anything that might prove what I'd seen. But there was nothing. No burned grass, no evidence, nothing at all. That night marked the beginning of an awakening I still don't fully understand. The threads of it stretch across years, across encounters, all woven back to that one impossible moment, when I looked into the eyes of something beyond our world, but a part of it at the same time. I often wonder what happened to me during the missing time, the seconds that turned to hours.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The Owlman and the Mothman share that same eerie overlap: winged, human-like, intelligent, both typically involve missing time, but this encounter feels gentler, almost purposeful. Where Mothman is tied to warning and disaster, the Owlman here feels like a messenger of some kind, watching, acknowledging, maybe even guiding. How can you account for all that missing time, though? Let me know what you think in the comments. For our final story of the evening, A Tennessee man recalls his uncle's chilling encounter with a towering red-eyed creature outside his home in the Smoky Mountains.
I was just a kid when this happened, staying at my grandfather's house in eastern Tennessee. That week, the local news was full of UFO stories. People claiming they'd seen little gray creatures with those big, bug-like eyes. Nobody thought too much of it around here. We already had plenty of Bigfoot sightings in the Smoky Mountains. My mom was driving down from Michigan to pick us up. It was August, summer vacation, and she planned to visit for a few days before we headed back so I could start school in the fall. One afternoon, we went over to my great-uncle's place. My great-aunt was baking a blackberry pie, and we were planning to pick berries just a little ways from the house, maybe 100 yards or so. While we were there, my Uncle Marion turned to my grandpa and said, "John, I gotta tell you something. You're gonna think I've lost my mind." Now at that age, I just sat and listened when the grown-ups talked. Marion went on, "2 nights ago I woke up out of a dead sleep and reached over for a cigarette." His house was small, one of those old country homes where you could see straight from the bedroom through the living room to the front door. "I reached for my cigarette," he said, and looked up to see something standing in my doorway. The screen door was open. It was summer, hot and still, and there it was. He said the thing had red eyes that seemed to burn right through him. The bottom of his door sat about 3 feet off the ground since the house was built on blocks, and the creature's head was nearly at the top of the frame. That would have made it at least 8, maybe 8.5 feet tall. It was covered head to toe in dark black hair. No visible neck, just this massive shape filling the doorway, and those glowing red eyes locked on him. He said he froze, not sure what to do. Then instinct kicked in. He reached for his M1 rifle. But when he looked back, it was gone. When he stepped outside, there were no footprints. The ground was too hard, and what unsettled him most, the dogs hadn't made a sound. My grandpa asked, "What did it look like? A gorilla?" And Marion shook his head. "No," he said. "It looked more like a man, just covered in hair." It just stood there, staring at me. A few months later, a magazine called Argus ran a cover story, "Bigfoot of the Smoky Mountains, summer of '67. I don't think that magazine's around anymore, but I remember buying a copy years later in Michigan. It's gone missing since then. But I'll tell you this, I believe my uncle. He wasn't one to spin tall tales. He was a tough mountain man, and when he told that story, his voice shook. You could tell he was scared.
That's all for tonight, dear listeners. If you want to become a Patreon cult member to get extended episodes and other full Patreon-only episodes, you can sign up at patreon.com/campfirecultpod for only $5 a month. And please remember, if you want to support this podcast and love a damn good cup of coffee, head on over to outlandscoffee.com and use code CAMPFIRE for $5 off your first order and give us a try. Until next time, I'll be leaving you in the dark where whispers linger and shadows dance. Stay weary, sleep well, and beware the whispers in the night. If you have a story to tell, please reach out via email at contact@campfirecultpod.com or leave me a voicemail message at 720-297-8608. You can follow us anywhere on social media at Campfire Cult Pod and online at campfirecultpod.com. And finally, if you don't mind, please rate and review wherever possible.